Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. I am so excited to interview our guest today. We are joined by Derek T. Smith, an employment discrimination and sexual harassment attorney and managing partner who has spent more than 3 decades challenging fear-driven workplace systems. I love this, and he represents employees. Thanks for your time today, Derek.
Well, Wendy, thank you very much for having me. I'm thrilled to be on with you and speaking with you about HR matters. And, as I was thinking about your podcast, I'm thinking, wait a second. I'm an employment lawyer representing employees. Why in the world would I go on a podcast and start talking to the enemy? The HR side, the employer.
Because we're not the enemy.
I know. I'm just saying the stereotypical view of the whole plaintiff side, employer side, etc. And it occurred to me that, we all are, or at least should be, concerned about a happy workplace.
Right.
So I know I've mentioned this to you before when we last spoke, that doctors and certain types of lawyers are the only ones who are trying to eliminate the need for their job. So there's discrimination, there's sexual harassment out there, and there are laws, and we try to punish those who commit discrimination, sexual harassment, and compensate those who are the victims of that. And the ultimate goal is to have it stop.
Right.
So yes, meeting with HR and as you know, having a happy workforce is having a profitable workforce. So it all goes hand in hand. We're all like moving towards the same goal of having happy, safe employees.
Yeah, we really are. I think, I'm an HR consultant, and I also do the same thing. Most of my time is spent training managers. These days, I've changed my focus so that I could say, okay, let me train you so you don't have to call me. So your employees don't have to call Derek, or, you don't have to call your own employment attorney to represent yourself. So let's identify and eliminate as much high risk areas as possible. So speaking of, many organizations say they prohibit retaliation, yet it remains the most common complaint field or filed. Talk to me about that. What are the subtle or maybe unintentional ways that retaliation shows up in workplaces today?
Okay. Retaliation is rampant. In fact, over half of the EEOC charges that come across the EEOC's desk are for retaliation. Also, very often, the original case may be very small in that it was not a very intense act of sexual harassment or discrimination, but the retaliatory actions that happen in response could be the biggest part of the case. So by all means, a lot of employers, they advertise this open door policy. Oh, my door is always open. I have an open door policy. And then when someone complains, the employee is treated like a pariah.
Right.
And that's where something called temporal proximity comes into play.
Ooh, tell us about that.
So we employment lawyers, we look at temporal proximity. We look at when did the complaint take place, or the latest complaint, and then when did the adverse employment action happen. And the closest temporal proximity would be in the very same conversation. Oh, you don't like that, so-and-so grabbed your butt, you're fired. That would be an immediate temporal proximity, and that shows clear as day that the person is being retaliated against because of their protected activity, complaining. But then the temporal proximity could be, okay, over the next like month, 2 months, 3 months. Courts generally look for 6 months of time for an employment lawyer to be able to tie it in to as related to the protected activity of complaining. So if, let's say, an employee comes and complains about an act of discrimination,
Hmm.
and let's say at the same time that employee had disciplinary issues,
Right.
that becomes a very tricky situation for HR because now if they fire that person shortly after they they've complained, it's going to be looked at as being as a result of that complaint and not because of the um, of the disciplinary issues. So my advice is if somebody does come to complain to you about a discrimination act or sexual harassment act, think very carefully about firing that person, taking any disciplinary action, even if you were about to do it, reevaluate because it could be perceived as because of that person's protected activity. I'm not saying that you don't have a right to do so. I'm just letting you know that it's going to be very difficult to get out of that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So if that's the case, even though you're thinking, I am 99% sure this employee's lying and they're just trying to get out of a performance improvement plan or worse, a termination, maybe call your friendly employment attorney first, right?
100%. And you have a duty to investigate. Someone complains. Are there situations where people make a fake complaint? I'm sure it exists. I'm sure it does. But every complaint should be taken seriously, a proper investigation. And if you don't do a proper investigation, that will strip the employer of very important rights that the employer has, such as what's known as the Farragher-Eller defense. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. That's
I
like the
have.
yeah, that's the biggest defense an
Hmm.
employer has.
So again, folks, if you are about to terminate somebody, right, wrong, or indifferent, you've had lengthy documentation and they complain about discrimination or harassment, or they say they're being retaliated against because of a complaint, stop, think very carefully first, and call your friendly employment attorney because our guest that is online has helped recover more than $400 million for employee victims who were intentionally discriminated against, harassed, or maybe retaliated. So, congratulations to your clients for having the wherewithal to call an attorney and say, you know what, I didn't do anything wrong, and I think I need some help here. Many people are afraid to do that.
Oh my God, so many people are scared of retaliation, being blackballed in the industry, etc. And it takes a lot to come forward. But fortunately, most of the time, these cases are resolved privately, confidentially, usually in a mediation behind closed doors. And the employer doesn't want this to be public either, generally. And so we work out a private settlement. And other times, okay, this is why we have courts. We can't decide on a fair settlement, and we move forward. And even then, if it's an act of sexual assault or some forms of sexual harassment, the person could be afforded the right to proceed anonymously as Jane Doe or John Doe.
I love that. Can you explain to our listeners just real briefly, like what mediation is?
99% of all settlements in what I do get resolved by mediation. In fact, the second settlement comes up, who do you like to use? And there's a list of usual suspects who you mediate with. And in, let's say, the personal injury world, mediation is like you go in for half hour, a retired judge yells at you and take this much money and you give this much money and you walk out. Not the way in employment law. employment law mediations are a full 8 to 10 hour day where its purpose is also to exhaust the parties. And,
Right.
and, and I have to have a little prep talk with my clients beforehand. Bring a book, bring your laptop so you can watch Netflix. I can't have you be victim to fatigue and make decisions based on fatigue. So sometimes I even have them do little like improv exercises just to wake them up,
Right.
And and these mediations generally are you go into a mediation center and you go into a big conference room and you have the mediators say, "Would you like to tell us what your case is about, Mr. Smith?" And I'll give a little blurb. And you don't want to be too ornery. You don't want to be too provoking because you're there for the same goal. You're trying to resolve it. And if you act like a jerk, you're going to be treated like a jerk. But I've seen other attorneys go in there and they're huff and puff. I'm like, you're doing your client no service there, pal. So we both say what our case is about, and we tell them what their risk is if we move forward, and then we break off into separate rooms, caucuses. This is called shuttle diplomacy. Henry Kissinger was an expert in this. And you go back and forth, or the mediator goes back and forth between the rooms and discusses the strengths and weaknesses and numbers. And that's really what happens. And that's why it's always a good idea in mediations not to reveal all of your cards, because at some point during that 8 hour thing, you're going to want to reveal additional information. And don't forget, during that 8 hours, you're doing further research, you're looking up things, you're having intense conversations with your clients, maybe even getting a star witness at that very moment who can help your case. And then
Well,
at the end
thank
of the
you.
day, hopefully it settles.
And the reason I really want to stress on that too, folks, is because as Derek already mentioned, most of the complaints that are with the EEOC, and in fact, 55% of the complaints that are with the EEOC are specifically for retaliation. But then there's another statistic that I found from the Ethics and Compliance Initiative, their Global Business Ethics Survey, and they said that approximately 75% of employees who speak up about misconduct internally are already experiencing some form of retaliation. So the complaint can be retaliation alone, or it could be mixed with it. So it is very important to make sure, even if it's the worst employee ever, that we understand it is not okay to retaliate against somebody who's complaining about their rights being violated. And we'll kind of wrap that part up right there. It is so important, though. I mean, honestly, the reason, my phone rings all day, every day with my clients, I'm an HR consultant, is usually because of people's behavior. Their performance is a lot easier to identify once managers are trained, but it's usually their behavior. They weren't trained on how to behave or what it means to misbehave in the organization, or they're just not held accountable because managers aren't trained. So folks, please, please, please train your managers. I wanted to kind of switch gears here and, just out of the blue here. Well, we could talk about, since we're talking about lawsuits and complaints, let's talk about microaggressions. Can they lead to lawsuits?
So there's an old saying in our area of law that the discrimination, sexual harassment laws are not codes of civil conduct. They're not.
Right.
So people are going to be jerks. People are going to say boorish comments. They're going to do stupid, asinine things, but not everything is recoverable. And the courts have a test, which is the severe and or pervasive test. And that means that in order to sue for, let's say, a hostile work environment, it has to be beyond a minor incident, beyond a minor comment or conduct, but it has to be either severe or pervasive or a sufficient combination of both to make it actionable.
Wow.
So let me talk about what that means for a second. So microaggressions. Oh, he was not looking at me when he was talking to me today. I feel like I was a victim of a microaggression there. Okay, that's not going to cut it. So I give the example of Bill Clinton and Clarence Thomas, two big examples of sexual allegations of sexual harassment. And back in the day, Bill Clinton was accused of sexual harassment by his assistant, Paula Jones. Paula Jones alleged that Bill Clinton called her to his hotel room and to discuss business. She goes in there, and apparently he drops his pants and he says, suck it or something like that, and exposing himself. That's severe. That's
Right.
crazy severe. One instance, that's enough. Call it a day. And of course, sexual assaults or whatever, that's severe. That's enough. And then we have on the other complete opposite side of the spectrum, Clarence Thomas was working with his clerk at the time, I believe, Anita Hill. And Anita Hill alleged that at lunch, Clarence Thomas once commented, "Oh, what is that hair on your Pepsi can? Is that a pubic hair?" Okay, not a lot. That's insignificant. But let's say they went out to lunch and it happened almost every single day. Oh, look, another pubic hair. Look, another pubic. Like, come on, dude. Now we're getting to the point where that is, even though the level is not very severe, but it happens again and again and again, and that could be enough. So microaggressions, that I would consider to be like icing on the cake. They did X, Y, and Z. He grabbed me on the butt. They called me the N word. They did whatever. And on top of it, that's when a microaggression would come into play.
Yeah, and then it's even more severe and important to know that if it is microaggressions that are prevalent only against XYZ characteristics, right? Like racial characteristics, gender orientation, all those things that, are covered by so many laws across the United States.
Wendy, that's an amazing point because I get calls all the time, every day. I will get a call. I'm subject to a hostile work environment. I want to say, oh, why is it hostile? And again, it has to do with the boss just being a jerk or yelling or
Right.
whatever. It's only when it comes down to the protected classes: race, religion, gender, disability, sexual orientation, national origin, citizenship, age, pregnancy, um, sexual identity, those sort of things. If
Right.
it's not related to one of those protected activities, it's rare that you will have a case.
Yeah, there's actually a study from the National Library of Medicine on the prevalence of workplace microaggressions and racial discrimination. So I would definitely check that out, everyone. The study found that workplace microaggression was found to be at 73.6%. And these were in 3 different studies. So it's pretty high. But again, it doesn't mean that it's illegal, right? So you have to not only know the federal laws, but you need to know your state, county, and local laws depending on where you're located. But above and beyond the laws, if anybody has ever heard me speak to before, listen, just don't let your people be jerks. That's why you should have company values and hold people accountable for their behaviors. In fact, I wrote a book on that, so check that out. All right, let's switch gears one more time. Can you touch on the topic of they're inevitable, the in-office romances?
Ah, the in-office romance. So here's the deal. When you go to work, nobody, can realistically expect you to check your humanity. The reason why you and I are on this earth is because people are attracted to each other. It's just
Right.
it's just how it is. So it's terrifying for HR to think of anyone getting involved in a interoffice romance, but it does happen. And even in my office, I've had lawyers who have married their paralegal and two other lawyers who have a beautiful daughter together. There are other romances that have happened. It does happen.
Mm-hmm.
The things we all need to look out for, is there a power imbalance? Are they coworkers, or is it a supervisor in a relationship with a subordinate? Like, that is like red alert, watch out. as HR, you better meet with that couple, and you better have them sign what's known as a relationship agreement. Because when that doesn't happen, oh, I pound on the HR person during a deposition. So a relationship agreement, just to you acknowledge that there's the relationship. You acknowledge that from there on out, hopefully, that subordinate will not be that person's subordinate, that there are avenues to complain if you ever feel like it goes too far. But here's the terrifying part about that. All it takes, there could be a consensual, wanted relationship, and all it takes is just one time where that subordinate felt pressured into that sexual act or whatever they did, and that would be illegal. And that's something that they can absolutely 100% sue for. So it does happen. So the best advice I could give an employer is get insurance.
Get insurance for that. But also, I would just say again, share this information with your management team and let them know, like, hey, we allow it, we don't allow it. And whether you allow it or not, folks, hint, it's still happening. Over 60% of US adults have engaged in workplace romances, with 43% of these romances leading to marriage. And that was in Forbes. And so it's, as I mentioned, it's happening now. Additionally, some of these romances might involve cheating or sexual harassment claims. And so we want to make sure that we are protecting our employees, whether they're willingly in relationships or they're being coerced into relationships in the workplace. And as Derek already said, I completely agree. Removing if it's a direct supervisor that they're in a relationship with, even if it's casual dating, like, no, you cannot be their supervisor anymore. And that's going to be really hard for some small businesses, right?
Absolutely. There's nowhere to put them if they don't have
Right.
different departments, etc. Yeah, and sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and
One of you
let
have to
them
go.
have the relationship, and just constantly check in with them. How's it going? Because even if they break up, there can still be sexual harassment after the fact. So one side wants to continue the relationship, the other one doesn't. If that one person who wants to continue the relationship is now scorned, it is in danger of showing up in how they treat that person in work. It's a recipe for a disaster when that happens.
It really is. And, I mentioned, you may have to terminate that one or both of them if you are very, very, very strict on no office romance, which I'm not a fan of encouraging, because I'm telling you, it's going to happen no matter what. They're going to do it publicly and let you know about it, or they're going to do it behind the scenes, because we spend most of our time at work. So keep in mind reality when you're creating policies. All right, before
Absolutely.
we wrap up here, I have one more question just about, fear-based workplace cultures. What does an authentically and legally safe workplace culture actually look like?
Hmm. You know, uh,
What
I
practical what
prefer.
practical steps?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Like, what practical steps can HR take, then our listeners take, to make our department or whoever has the HR hat seem more safe and fair and trusted?
I'll speak from. So not only am I an employment lawyer representing employees, I'm an owner of a law firm nationwide that has many employees, and over the years I've had hundreds and hundreds of employees. So the way I do it, the way my HR director does it, is we treat it like a family. We are comfortable. We talk to people. I try once a week to at least go out to lunch with one of my employees, and we talk, and you get an idea of what's going on. We've also used confidential anonymous surveys that we have sent out to the employees saying, hey, uh, are you ever feel fearful of coming to HR? How do you feel that HR is doing? What do you feel the culture is like in the office right now? And those are invaluable. And it has to be stressed that these are anonymous and no one is going to even know who it is. And the purpose of this is, if it comes back, 40% of your people are saying that they're terrified to come to HR. They feel they're being treated unfairly for X, Y, and Z, something's got to change. So I love the idea of these anonymous surveys that can go out. And you don't just have them, you react to them and hopefully use that to make your work environment a little better.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a lot of work. It's not just like, oh, we have this great company handbook and a set of values and some rules. Everyone's going to fall in line. It's like, no, we have these things called humans that work for us, and we have to understand that we need to be interactive. We need to train our managers, which Aurora Training Advantage can help with. And we need to make sure that we do have employment attorneys on our side, the company side, because if you don't, your employees are going to have somebody like Derek on their side. Yeah, which, I appreciate all of your honesty and information here. The last statistic that I wanted to share is that this was from Google Project Aristotle Workplace Safety Research. Employees who feel psychologically safe at work are 76% more engaged and 50% more productive. So I'll take it. It's worth going the extra mile, right, Derek?
Oh, without a doubt. Make your employees happy. Don't forget, an employee who's making, $80,000 a year, uh, could probably get a job making $100,000 a year. But if they're happy where they are, if they enjoy their family, their work environment, they're not going to leave
Right.
because happiness is the most important thing in life. And so as long as they're getting paid fairly, as long as they're happy, as long as they feel safe, it's really not a complex formula. And don't discriminate against them. Every employee has the right to a workplace that is free of discrimination, of sexual harassment. And I say this to managers. These women there, or men, depending on the situation, they are not your harem. They are they are employees. Treat them with respect. Treat them well, and I promise you it will show up in your pocketbooks because they will help you make money and they will be loyal to you.
I love it. Hey, Derek, thank you so much for all this. How can our listeners connect with you to get more information?
So sure, if anyone wants any more information, it's Derek Smith Law. Happy to speak with anyone or have any of our attorneys speak with you if you have any issues. And thank you very much. It's been a pleasure learning what you do, speaking with you about the other side. And hey, you're not so bad. You're not so evil.
No comment on that. To our listeners, hey, check out our trainings live or recorded at Aurora Training Advantage. There's one called Conducting Workplace Investigations, and this often goes hand in hand with harassment claims. And I'd also say the same for how to determine reasonable accommodations under the ADA, as many employees often get harassed and discriminated against based on their disability. So check those out. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.